Hello, welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you are returning. There are a few of you that are new, so hello. I am Gabby. I do a lot of artwork on this channel. I am also a writer and an avid reader, so I'm going to also be doing book review videos. This will be my first one in this capacity because I usually write book reviews. Most of them are linked below on the blog that I've been writing on for about a year and a half or so, a year consistently. But I also have a Goodreads. You can add me on there. My username is just @groovygab. I've been trying to get into Fable, but it's almost so much better than Goodreads that I don't really know how to use it because there are so many different aspects of it. It's so multifaceted that I haven't really learned how to use Fable yet, and I'm stuck in a Goodreads rut because I'm used to it, even though the interface is just kind of terrible and everybody universally knows that, but I haven't upgraded to Fable yet. So if you want to encourage me to get over there, I will. But today we're going to be talking about the books that I have finished this past month. Anything I started from the end of October pretty much to now the end of November. It looks like I've got 7 books here. There might be another one or two that I didn't think were worth talking about because they were exclusively for class and I didn't really like them. So I'm going to be talking about these books here. We've got a chunker in there. That's The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And good God, I am a lover of using annotation tabs. I buy those big packs on Amazon. Sorry, I use Amazon still. I haven't bought them in months because they last forever. But I love to use them because I am an avid writer as well. So I need to be able to find quotes that I love and want to share with people and put into my writing. So I'm going to start with Divorcing by Susan Taubes. This one I finished at the end of October, if not the beginning of November. Susan Taubes was a friend of Susan Sontag's, actually. She was in the literary world, and this was her first novel, I believe, and it was her last one. She tragically took her own life shortly after publishing this book. It is not in the book, but there is this kind of sense of longing, feeling displaced in the world. The concept of divorcing is a central plot line. Not only is she divorcing her husband throughout the book, but she feels a divorce from her sense of self and the way her life has manifested since becoming married and becoming a mother. And I think she feels a pull between these two worlds of becoming an intellectual and just being a mother. Not that either are better than the other, but it seems that she wanted to write a book. The character, who is Sophie Blind in the novel, and she has a lot of overlap with Susan Taubes's real life. So it's kind of one of those scenarios where the author may be writing about themselves in a way. It was really sad. It kind of reminded me of the tone of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. The very intro scene, she dies. She dies. I mean, that's not a spoiler. It's the first page. She dies by getting hit by a car or a taxi, I think. And it just kind of delves into this kind of in and out, her childhood, her adulthood, being a mother, being a daughter, and it kind of zooms in and out between these things and these magical realism scenes where you're not really sure if she's dead or alive. And it's really interesting, but it's also really sad. So I generally liked this book. If I had to rate it out of 5 stars, I'd probably give it 3.5. And yeah, let me try to find a quote. Oh, I love putting sticky note summaries in books too. Ooh, I love annotating. Okay, so here is a quote that I really enjoyed about books. That Sophie Blind talks about on page 94. Quote, "Books were better than dreams or life. A book ended not like life, abruptly, not like a dream, with a clumsy struggle and sense of deception, but gracefully and knowingly, preparing you for the final period. Between life and dream, there was not much difference, really. However, the two wrangled, struggled, played tricks on each other. A book was something really different. To begin with, you know where you are. You're in a book, and whether the setting is Paris or New York or the moon or not specified at all, you know you're in a book. Perhaps you're on a plane, perhaps you're in a village in the Balkans, reading a book in a hotel room, reading or writing in someone else's room or your own kitchen when the children are asleep. You can be dreaming and not know it. You can be awake and wonder if it's a dream and not believe it. But a book is simply and always a book. You can be sure of that. And with a book, whether you're reading it or writing it, you are awake. The question does not pose itself. So good. Okay, moving on. The next book I read in one single sitting on a train ride from Venice to Rome with my boyfriend. It is only, 100 pages, almost exactly. So it's really short and sweet. It is The Beautiful Summer by, oh God, it's an Italian name, but I'm going to try. Cesare Pavese. I don't think it's Cesare, but I could be wrong. But regardless, this is apparently a really known book. And I wanted to read more Italian authors because I have begun writing for a magazine based and published out of Italy, written by expats. And I was like, I need to get more familiar with Italian authorship. I went to a bookstore and I asked them what their favorite Italian books were, and they recommended me this along with a couple of others. This was a good experience. It was kind of about, it was a basic coming of age, rites of passage for a girl to become a woman, aspects of puberty, virginity, relationship to a man, this concept of once you become a woman kind of thing, this innocence is lost. So basically, that's kind of what this whole novel is about. Our main character meets a slightly older woman who's really interesting, confident, flirtatious, and this younger character that's more inexperienced kind of follows in her footsteps and falls in love with a man who may or may not love her back, but regardless, it's about the experience of becoming a woman in terms of male validation. Also, it is reviewed by both Susan Sontag and Italo Calvino. Obviously, we already know who Susan Sontag is. She comes up everywhere. Italo Calvino, though, is also an incredible Italian author. Apparently, I have yet to read him. I am adding him to my list. My current managing editor of the magazine that I have just begun writing for once interviewed him, spent a day with him, and I think that's really beautiful. And it's basically a small world in some senses, and I think that's really cool. But yeah, let's find a quote. Okay, this quote is on page 67. It is a conversation between our main character, Ginia, and the man she falls in love with, Guido, who has joined the military, though he is an artist. He says, "If I am still capable of painting when I get rid of this uniform, I used to get some work done before. I used to finish a picture a week. They were exciting those days, but the good days are over." "Don't I matter to you?" asked Ginia. Then Guido pressed her arm. "You're not the summer. You don't know what it is to paint a picture. I ought to fall in love with you to teach you all about it. Then I should be wasting time. An artist can only work, if he has friends who understand what he's up to." "Haven't you ever been in love?" asked Ginia, avoiding his eyes. "What, with you folk? I haven't time." Anyway, Ginia desperately wants to be loved by Guido throughout this entire book. Does she ever get what she wants? You must read it to find out. Okay. Next, on the train ride back from Rome to Venice, I also read this in a single sitting. I realized I wouldn't have a book, so I bought it when I was in Rome, and it's Han Kang's The Vegetarian. I'd heard a lot about this, and I thought this copy was beautiful. This is a Granta copy, which I'm not familiar with. It's not Penguin. I'm not sure actually if Penguin publishes this at all, but I've just seen it everywhere. I've heard a lot of good things about it. It is just kind of about this woman that is in an unhappy marriage, and then she gives up eating meat, and from there things devolve in an interesting kind of feral animalistic way. She becomes this other person, you could say, and some things transpire between her and another man that is not her husband, and I don't want to spoil anything. Overall, the writing is good enough to sit and read in one sitting voraciously. Let's find a delicious quote. Okay, I'm going to do 2 quotes for this one. One is page 165. Quote, "She took one more look around at the various objects inside the house. They did not belong to her, just like her life had never belonged to her. Her life was no more than a ghostly pageant of exhausted endurance, no more real than a television drama. Death, who now stood by her side, was as familiar to her as a family member, missing for a long time, but now returned." Oh. Okay, another one, page 177. "It's your body. You can treat it however you please. The only area where you're free to do just as you like, and even that doesn't turn out how you want it." Poignant. So, pretty good. Easy read, quick read, weird read. Loved it, honestly. Okay, next. This one, this one is famous. This one is very famous. This was voted as #1 on the New York Times Book Review 100 Best Books of the 21st Century. I recently wrote a very full-fledged essay/book review on this that will be published shortly to the magazine I have begun writing a book column for. It's pro bono. Why? No, it's okay. But this was a gorgeous book. Oh my gosh. Okay. Author Elena Ferrante does not exist. It is a pen name, pseudonym, however you'd like to call it. This is one of a Neapolitan quartet. It is based in the cities of Naples, Italy. It is a Southern Italian coming of age story about the loss of innocence and these 2 girls that are best friends and how they've grown up together in a world kind of downtrodden by economic immobility, as well as the patriarchy, which hurts them as well as the men in their lives, and kind of this suffocating sense of how maybe where you were born or the lot you've been given can sometimes be a type of golden handcuffs, golden or not. I loved this so much. It was really weird, but it was like weird in the sense that it was written in the youthful voice of the 2 best friends, Elena Greco and Raffaella Cerullo. She went by Elena though, or Lila. It was written from when they were probably about 7 to when they were probably about 18, graduating high school type of age. It is based in the 50s, so it's not that unbelievable, especially in a place that was not economically thriving. Quote, "I feel no nostalgia for our childhood. It was full of violence. Every sort of thing happened, at home and outside, every day, but I don't recall having ever thought that the life we had there was particularly bad. Life was like that, that's all. We grew up with the duty to make it difficult for others before they made it difficult for us." Ooh, just a classic Tragedy of the Commons take. That is page 37. It is from page 261. It is Lila explaining things and kind of this general nihilism to her best friend Elena. She says, quote, "There are wars, there's a poverty that makes us all cruel. Every second something might happen that will cause you such suffering that you'll never have enough tears. And what are you doing? A theology course in which you struggle to understand what the Holy Spirit is? Forget it. It was the devil who invented the world, not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Do you want to see the string of pearls that Stefano gave me?" Ow, that was so good. The contrast. She said, zoom out, zoom in. What really matters? And I've just never read something that illustrates the relationship between women as well as this did. So I'd highly recommend this. Out of all these books, this might be my favorite one. So yeah, on to the next. Here is this absolute tome. I think this was like it was only like 530 pages. But The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. I so far had only read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, which was incredibly short and sweet, but maybe not so sweet. So this is my second Steinbeck. I do love and appreciate Steinbeck's writing. It feels like, God, who does he remind me of? maybe a little Mark Twain, a little George Orwell in terms of writing style. The Grapes of Wrath, a classic. I didn't read it in high school. I don't know if people usually do. It seems like something that would be considered a classic read in high school, but it's basically a bunch of people leaving Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl to head to California in like early 1900s, 20s, for hopefully a better life, for work, for some kind of land that they can begin to plow and create a life for themselves again. And it follows these people and their struggles and how dehumanizing the entire situation was, and how these people were led to believe there was opportunity in this land of promise and when there really wasn't. And so the ending is incredibly sad, and it's kind of underwhelming in some ways because it just does not spare you. A great demonstration and illustration of the human condition, how people come together in times of extreme poverty and struggle, people are capable of, how strong people can be, resilient, the role of family and the ties we have to each other and our loyalties to each other, giving, receiving, all of these dynamics, class issues, the role of cops, the fear of communism, all of these things are central themes to this book that are incredibly well done because Steinbeck is a master, of course. So let's get into some quotes. Okay, here's another beautiful illustration of the sentiment, the sense of community that they had to form during this time. Page 227, quote, "In the evening, a strange thing happened. The 20 families became one family. The children were the children of all. The loss of home became one loss, and the golden time in the West was one dream. And it might be that a sick child threw despair into the hearts of 20 families of 100 people, that a birth there in a tent kept 100 people quiet and awestruck through the night and filled 100 people with the birth joy in the morning. A family which the night before had been lost and fearful might search its goods to find a present for a new baby. In the evening, sitting about the fires, the 20 were one. They grew to be units of the camps, units of the evenings and the nights. A guitar unwrapped from a blanket and tuned, and the songs, which were all of the people, were sung in the nights. Men sang the words, and women hummed the tunes." Okay, the second to last book, number 6 out of 7, is Susan Sontag's Regarding the Pain of Others. I did read this for a class. This one is a quick read. It is only a little over 100 pages. Basically, she dives into the effect that photography in particular, and the media depictions of struggles going on in the world, primarily wars, and just general suffering of the world being depicted and shown to the public. New forms of media created a sense of immediacy that was once harder to achieve with just storytelling. And she basically kind of dives into gray areas in moral accountability. You know, what should we be showing on the internet or on TV in particular? This was written in 2003, so it was mostly referencing newspaper and TV, magazines, because the internet was not such a giant thing yet. But regardless, she asks a question of what is okay to show, what isn't. It's really interesting, thought-provoking. It's more an analysis on the role photography in particular has played in media than it is giving any definitive opinion. An interesting quote from page 57 to 58. Quote, "The terms for allowing the use of cameras at the front for non-military purposes have become much stricter as war has become an activity prosecuted with increasingly exact optical devices for tracking the enemy. There is no war without photography. That notable aesthete of war, Ernst Jünger, observed in 1930, thereby refining the irrepressible identification of the camera and the gun. Quote, shooting an object and shooting a human being. War making and picture taking are congruent activities. Quote, it is the same intelligence whose weapons of annihilation can locate the enemy to the exact second and meter, wrote Jünger, that labors to preserve the great historical event in fine detail." And this quote in particular I found incredibly poignant for today, as the internet makes things available to us so quickly and so widely and sometimes unfiltered. And I remember when the evening news showed footage of the destruction of Vukovar just a couple of 100 miles away. I thought to myself, quote, "Oh, how horrible," and switched the channel. So how can I be indignant if someone in France or Italy or Germany sees the killing take place here day after day on their evening news and says, "Oh, how horrible," and looks for another program? It's normal, it's human. Wherever people feel safe, this was her bitter, self-accusing point, they will be indifferent. It is because, say, the war in Bosnia doesn't stop, because leaders claimed it was an intractable situation, that people abroad may have switched off the terrible images. It is because of war, any war, doesn't seem as if it can be stopped, that people become less responsive to the horrors. Compassion is an unstable emotion. It needs to be translated into action, or it withers. The question is what to do with the feelings that have been aroused, the knowledge that has been communicated. If one feels that there is nothing we can do, but who is that we? And nothing they can do either, and who are they? Then one starts to get bored, cynical, apathetic. Written in 2003. Still a great analysis on media depictions of war and how we react to them. I especially think this is an issue with social media today that still has not been figured out. You know, we all struggle with it. It is part of human life now. So here we are in a global world. How do we respond to the pain of others? And the last book that I finished this month is Venice and the Anthropocene, an eco-critical guide. This was written by a few people. It's a series of kind of essays and short excerpts about things having to do with Venice's history and how it is transformed over time, as well as the ecological issues of the present and the future that are very pressing, considering the projection in 100 years is for Venice to be completely underwater. So it was thought-provoking in some ways. It is essay format. One thing I will give this book is it is like stunning, okay? It's full of beautiful photography. There are these pages with these kind of like beautiful gradient colors that are reminiscent of the lagoon. There are photographs from various parts of Venice, and we're kind of jumping back and forth between the past and present. And it talks about all kinds of things, you know, from woodworms eating away at wooden pilings to immigrant populations to tourism, how we're going to deal with a continuously rising sea level, the aqua alta or the high water situation. It's interesting in that sense, but I felt kind of disappointed in the edits done on this book. I read a lot, and it is rare I come across a typo. I found multiple typos in this book. I don't know who edited this. It does say it was edited by 4 people, all of which are professors at the university I'm attending. So I'm like, why didn't they outsource this if they weren't able to find simple typos? I don't know. It kind of affected it a lot for me because after I found one, I was like, okay, that's weird. And to keep finding them kind of discredited the publisher for me. But regardless, I think it was interesting and it was visually beautiful. So let's find a couple of interesting quotes. This is from an essay by Lucio Di Capitani. Page 16, quote, "The concept of bonifica umana, moreover, leads us to one of the most blatant signs of the Anthropocene in Venice today, mass tourism. Epitomized by the giant cruise ships that regularly cruise across the lagoon, causing great social and environmental damage, the touristic monoculture today stands in Venice as a dangerous example of the almost successful transformation of an entire city into a value-producing machine at the expense of its inhabitants. They are squashed between 2 deadly development models, the theme park and the more elitist open-air museum, neither of which is compatible with the use of a city and its sociality and its environment as a common good. All this considered, just as the Anthropocene desperately requires a new story, so does Venice. Faced with environmental threats, extractivist policies, and over-tourism, the survival of Venice looks like a seemingly insoluble labyrinth that requires a radical rethinking of the status quo and a new, sustainable, fairer vision of the future. So does the planet. That's honestly a pretty good summation of this entire book. So I would recommend this if you're interested in Venice's role on the world stage in terms of a kind of experiment and how people can adapt to rising sea levels. So yeah, interesting one. I would recommend. I would rate it maybe only 3 out of 5 stars just because of the typos. Who edited this? Why didn't they hire me? Anyway, that is my nice pile of 7 books that I've read this past month. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be doing these whenever I feel like it, so I'm making no promises whatsoever. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have read any of these, if you have any recommendations similar to any of these authors, if you have any cool ideas, if you have a Goodreads account and you want me to follow you, I would love to. I need more friends in the literary review world. And yeah, thank you for being here. Bye. Me and my books.